Philippians 1:18 says, "What then? Only that in every way Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice." Hello, friends. I'm Paul Hahn, coordinator of Mission in North America. In this 30-day season of praying gratitude to God in the middle of crisis and coming out of the COVID crisis. In this next section, you're going to be hearing from Mission in North America church planners, lessons they've learned about giving thanks to God in the middle of crisis as they are planting churches and establishing new works of the gospel. Here Paul is writing from prison and talking about thanksgiving. He writes as a man in chains, talking about rejoicing. How do you do that? The only way you do that is having this sense that no matter what the circumstance is, if I am trusting Christ, then he can be praised there. If I'm trusting Christ, he can be proclaimed there. If I am trusting Christ in the middle of whatever circumstance I find myself, freedom or chains, I can give thanks because he is at work there. What an odd time we find ourselves in. Many of you may have lost your jobs or have family members who have lost your jobs. Many of you may have been deathly ill or at least somewhat ill during this season, or had a close family member become ill or even pass away because of this crisis. Others of us are dealing with other kinds of chains right now, wondering about the events in Brunswick, Georgia, and Louisville, Kentucky, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, about the racial violence and oppression and division that we see on display in those places, the injustice that seems to be so rampant in these situations, and we're weighed down by this. We live in a kind of imprisonment because of this brokenness, whether we are a person of color or not. What do we do? In these places we can give thanks. Why? Because as Paul did, we can have confidence even in these spaces of radically difficult hardship, of challenge, when we are surrounded by brokenness. We can believe the gospel that God has given his Son for us to move in our lives and through us in the world, to bring mercy and justice to us and through us. And we can proclaim that hope from those spaces into others in those spaces. Living and proclaiming the gospel gives us joy. Paul here specifically in these verses in the middle of Philippians 1:14 to 18 that you're focusing on today in this little study with the study guide, Paul's challenged by something. He says some people are sad that he's imprisoned and yet they're going on preaching the gospel. Others are sort of happy that he's in prison, that he's sort of off the preaching market and they can move into the spotlight and they can become the key preacher, getting all the fame and the glory. And Paul says whether it's in truth or in pretense, whatever the case, if Christ is proclaimed, then I have joy. So let us, in the middle of all the brokenness we find over COVID, over financial crisis, over racial injustice and oppression, let us hope in Jesus. Let us believe that he who has begun a good work will complete it in us and in his church in the world. Let us stand with Jesus for mercy and justice through the gospel. And let us rejoice as Christ is with us and presents himself through our words and his deeds and our deeds of the gospel to give hope to all around us. We can rejoice even here. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Let's give thanks.